Hello and welcome to Hunter Fuel, a supernatural rewatch podcast for adults who enjoy their show with a chaser. I'm Liz, and I am absolutely thrilled that you are here joining me for a special bonus episode of Supernatural Podcast, in which I will be talking about the supernatural book of monsters, spirits, demons, and ghouls. So they wanted to be very thorough in their title, make sure they didn't miss anything. Of course, they don't have angels in the title, but shh. It was written by Alex Irvine and was published in 2007. So, in fairness, at that point in the show, they didn't think angels existed. But it coincides with the end of season two. It claims in the preface to be authored by Sam and Dean Winchester and takes place about a year after John died, but before the yellow eyed demon is killed in All Hell Breaks Loose Part 2. As I've said in earlier episodes, there will not be featured cocktails for any of the bonus content that Lynn and I record because, come on, folks, 327 episodes, that is a lot of individual, unique cocktails to track down. And I'm not confident I just don't have the strength. I'm going to be honest to try to find more than 327. I'm not signing up for any more. So what I am drinking instead is a pre-mixed cocktail from a local distillery. It is a passion fruit punch. And not only is it tasty, it is relatively strong. Plus, this is the second bonus episode I'm recording today, so things are about to get interesting. Okay, so for the book, my first impressions, it is printed with these sort of faux raggedy edge pages. Um, now, I'm a stickler about things like this, but every single page has the exact same ragged edge design. Um, so they're all identical. But I think it's supposed to give it kind of a well thumbed through feel. Whether or not it achieves that, not so much. But I think that's what they're going for. It also includes what claim to be portions of Dad's journal. They're written on a spiral bound, like you can see the spiral um, on the clips from Dad's journal, and of course we all know John's journal is a three-ring binder, so that's not quite so accurate. The section headers are also printed to look like they were taped down scraps of paper. I honestly don't know what that's about. I'm gonna go into that a little more later. According to the introduction, there's a war coming, and when it starts, we're all going to need to know as much as we can about the other side. So it appears to presume that the reader is another hunter that the Winchesters want to share their knowledge with. The author makes a mistake right off the back. Like it's literally on the very first page. He writes that Dean was 5 when Mary was killed instead of 4, which didn't give me high hopes for the accuracy of the content compared to what we see on screen. I wish I could tell you they course corrected after that, but I can't. Excuse me a moment. Mm, gotta wet my whistle. So the book itself is a mixture of a hunter's journal with descriptions of the hunts that we see in the series and a supernatural bestiary with entries for spirits such as the woman in white, quote unquote monsters like a wendigo and shapeshifters, and undead creatures like vampires, zombies, or zools and gombies. I think ghouls and zombies. As I said, it claims to be a collaborative effort between Sam and Dean, and you can quote unquote hear sort of Sam's academic style and Dean's kind of tough guy front as you read, and that's kind of fun. Again, it does contain sections of John's journal. Uh, Amusingly enough, in 2009, Alex Irvine will also publish John Winchester's journal, and there's no correlation at all between the clips, pardon me, we see in this book and what's written later in John's journal. Normally, I wouldn't issue demerits for this book not lining up with something that's not going to be written for 2 more years. But I'm particularly annoyed by this one because it's the exact same author, and it really tempts me to smack their knuckles for this one. Okay, so in my opinion, here's what they get wrong. On more than one occasion reading this book, I asked myself if the author had ever seen the series in reality or was just working from episode summaries. As an example, in the section on Native American curses, because apparently there's a special kind of curse that only comes from Native American folks, they recount the story of their run-in with a curse that we saw in the episode Bugs. The story as told to them by Joe Whitetree is included, and it's word for word the same. But they identify Joe as a woman, spelled J-O, rather than the man we see on screen who spells his name J-O-E. They also fail to mention that the spirit in the episode Playthings was Rose's sister. And they say that Rose sacrificed herself to save her family. Now, in the series, Sam and Dean aren't aware of the cause of Rose's death. We know as the audience because we see the interaction between Rose and Maggie, but the boys don't know what stops the spirit from drowning Tyler. They do make kind of an interesting connection between Rose's sacrifice in Playthings, and the sheriff's sacrifice in Dead in the Water, which is kind of interesting, about people sacrificing themselves to save their families from a vengeful spirit. But like I said, they don't quite get all the details right. The book is illustrated. There's some kind of fun line drawings in it. They're pretty well done, I will say. But they don't all make sense based on what we see on screen. There's an entry for tulpas, and they walk through the events of the episode Hell House. And the text refers to the Tibetan sigil that brought the tulpa to life. But the illustration in the book is of the blue oyster cult, like upside down question mark with the crossbars. So, like, yes, that symbol features in the episode, but it's not the right sigil. It's not Tibetan. They also have an illustration of the Key of Solomon, but it doesn't match what Bobby had painted on the ceiling in Devil's Trap. The drawing for the Reaper entry is the ghost doctor from Asylum and a Reaper, although they do have a drawing of a Reaper on the next page. So it's like somebody told them about Supernatural, but they hadn't actually watched Supernatural, or at least didn't have input from anyone who was really familiar with the details of the show. And it honestly, it gives it a bit of a rushed feel. Um, I'm prepared to extend grace for content about creatures that hadn't appeared in the series yet. That makes absolute sense to me that they're not totally going to line up with what we see on screen. But there are some mistakes for creatures that had showed up on screen. Um, the description of the Jinn makes absolutely no sense, none at all, um, compared with how they're portrayed in what is and what should never be. There's also an entry for Goofer Dust, which doesn't mention Goofer Dust. Like they've got it, again, that like fake piece of paper, fake taped to the page. It says Goofer Dust. And then the paragraph is about an incantation to ward off the evil eye, and that incantation is kiss my ass. So while I can see Dean being really just absolutely thrilled that there was an incantation to ward off evil, that they could kiss his ass. It doesn't make any sense under an entry for Goofer Dash. Um, especially when we see it on screen and we know what it is as fans of the show. My guess is that it's a timing issue. Now, the Go for Dust thing doesn't make any sense, but the rest of it, I think, is something of a timing issue, because when the book would have needed to go to the publisher compared to when the episodes were written and filmed. But it is still jarring considering that the book would have been released right about the same time that these episodes were airing. So it's a little jarring. That said, they they do some things right. The book references most of the Monster of the Week episodes that we see in the first two seasons, including the events of the pilot, Hookman, Skin, Night Shifter, Asylum, Crossroad Blues, Home, No Exit, Phantom Traveler, Route 666, many more. It's also aware of the events of the comic book Origins, which I did a bonus episode on previously. If you're not familiar with that, you're welcome to go back and watch that supernatural bonus episode. And it has some brief details about hunts that appear nowhere else, and those are always interesting to me. Um, the connections between the Book of Monsters, blah blah blah, and the series are fun to recognize. Like it's fun when you're reading it, going, "Oh, I know what episode that is." In Houses of the Holy, for example, the boys are forced to use an upside down SpongeBob SquarePants placemat as an altar cloth. The illustration in the book includes a strangely familiar square figure, let's say. And so that's kind of amusing. Because, like they don't mention SpongeBob in their description of the hunt, but when you see the illustration, it's a fun little nod. When they discuss the events, excuse me, of Heart, there's a mention in the clip from John's journal that there might be a cure, which lines up with what happens in the episode. Interestingly enough, the reference to Heart is very clear that Sam and Madison connected. Without going into, let's say, blow by blow details, but the reference to Hookman doesn't mention the falling out the boys have that caused Dean to leave Sam on the side of the road, and then Sam was on his way to California and met Meg, and Dean almost got himself hookmaned to death. Um, or sorry, scarecrowed, mixing them up, scarecrowed to death. Um, so it's interesting that they mention Sam gets busy, but they don't mention the fight that the boys had. So I thought that was kind of um, I thought that was an interesting choice. In line with the book's role as a supernatural how-to book, there are two appendices, one for herbs, oil, and hoodoo hands. Whose hands? Hoodoo hands. And it's an encyclopedia style collection of lore around different substances. So just like it says, oils, herbs, and hoodoo hands. The second appendix is for European lore on various demons. Neither one really has anything to do with the show, barring that two of the demons show up later in the series, Asmodeus and Belphegor. But if the book is claiming to be a guide to the supernatural world, it would make sense that that kind of thing is included. Okay, so something I loved and something I hated. Starting with what I loved. Reading through it and thinking about all the monsters the boys have yet to face is kind of fun because like you're reading through and there'll be a little throwaway thing like, oh, Sam and I never had much use for, imaginary friends, and you go, oh, just wait, there's a particularly lovable Xana named Sully, that you have to look forward to. um or there are entries for, Selkies that appear in the supernatural comic, The Dogs of Edinburgh. Kitsune have an entry, which, Dean will kill a kitsune named Amy Pond in The Girl Next Door. There's an entry for Golem, and there is a Golem, and everybody hates Hitler. Um, ghouls from Jump the Shark, references to Lilith. There's even a Nachzer that the boys will reckon with in Baby. So all of that is pretty fun, that you kind of read through it and you're like, ooh, just wait. Sam and Dean Winchester, you have so much to look forward to. The thing that I hated, though, my biggest complaint, is that you can't quite figure out what the book is supposed to be. Like, what is it? Is it supposed to be the boy's journal? In which case, it doesn't really have a lot of the details you would kind of expect it to have if it were a journal. Is it an instruction manual for other hunters? Um, and again, if it's a journal, I would want it to add details that we don't necessarily see on screen. If you saw the bonus episode that I did for the anime series, you heard me say something similar, that they had a real opportunity here to flesh out the supernatural world that we see on screen. And they don't fully capitalize on that opportunity. And that's a little disappointing. The book claims to be everything Sam and Dean know to benefit other hunters, and it presumes that the reader is another hunter. There's even a little bit in the Rakshasa entry with the quote, "You other hunters will know what we're talking about." Wink, wink. Um, from that perspective, it makes sense to include retellings of the hunts that we see on screen if they focus on the details of recognizing the monsters. How do you identify them? How do you hunt them? How do you kill them? But they really don't focus on those details. um, so I just really felt like, if you're interested in learning about the real world lore behind the supernatural creatures the Winchesters face, there's some good in background here, but unfortunately, it's like buried under retellings of things we already know. For my money, what I would have loved to see is, uh, if it were Sam's journal or Sam's bestiary written in his kind of, academic voice. And then it was just filled with uh, doodles and rude comments and little additional commentary from Dean written in the margin. I think something like that would have been really cute. Um, again, that's my opinion on that. So, should you get it? It depends. If you are a completist and you want to own everything in the world of supernatural, purchase away. If you're looking for something more like a companion volume with all the real world lore, honestly, there are better options on, folklore and cryptozoology. Um, there's other places to look for the information. So if it were me, I'd say, you can probably save your pennies on this one. Okay, that is last call. Hmm. I had a very big square ice cube, but it is now almost gone. So my drink is getting watered down, and that is sad. But thanks so much for coming along with me for the ride. If you like what we're doing here, be sure to tell your friends. Please also like our videos and subscribe so it's easier for other people to find us too. We love hearing from our SPN family. If you've read the Supernatural Book of Monsters, yada, 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 send us an email at hunterfuelpodcast@gmail.com and let us know what your thoughts are. If you disagree with me, I'd love to hear that. Hmm. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Hunter Fuel Podcast. Len and I will be continuing our rewatch with let me try that one again. We will be continuing our rewatch with season 3, episode 1, The Magnificent Seven. Until then, be safe, everybody. Bye bye.